Look, it's a good thing being able to speak at the January lunch. It's a great opportunity to reflect back on the previous year and also to outline some plans for the forthcoming year in what are really still uncertain times. It's fair to say that 2019 was a year of uncertainty, what with Brexit, trade war, tensions, Middle East conflicts, climate change, and of course elections. 2020 brings a lot more certainty. Certainty in that we know we will have to contend with Brexit, trade war tensions, Middle East conflicts, climate change, and elections. However, let's bring matters closer to home. I stood here, well actually it was over there, in January 2019 and outlined some of Barclays' objectives. So I'm going to give you an abridged report on how we helped play our part in securing the future prosperity of the island to make sure that we do have a thriving local community. So lending, we supported hundreds of individuals and local non-finance sector businesses with mortgages and other credit facilities totaling approaching £250 million to locals. Included within that were first-time buyer schemes I said we would do for Andean, parishes and the government. Investments. In an era of uncertainty, customers turn to a bank that's been around for over 300 years and has been given investment advice on this island for 35 years. Our flagship discretionary sterling medium risk portfolio is currently performing over a one-year basis as the best mandate, as judged by independent consultants ARC, and it's also been in the upper quartile for the last 5 years. I talked a lot about corporate social responsibility. Well, we sponsored the boat show again in 2019. We've got the Eagle Lab, I shall say no more. We ran loads of cyber security sessions. We did our Barclays Life Skills programs for schools and Prince's Trust. Over 600 students helped over the course of the year. We did the Channel Islands Student Business Challenge and assisted with Young Enterprise, again helping another 150 students. So what does 2020 hold? Well, we're going to provide more certainty. Certainty that Barclays will be here in our lovely new building towards the middle of the year on the Esplanade. And we're going to continue with our full range of banking, lending and investment offerings for our local customers. Plus, our corporate social responsibility continues. Some examples. Tomorrow at the Eagle Lab, we'll be running a cybersecurity session for Jersey Hospitality Association members. Tomorrow, we launch the 2020 Channel Islands Student Business Challenge, and there'll be over 200 students there across 6 schools. In February, we're working with Jersey Business on an agricultural innovation event, so please get in touch if you're in that sector. And I'm delighted to say that we continue with the boat show, which was sponsored again in 2020 and through to 2022. So in summary, Barclays, through its 280 employees on island, will continue to support local people and local businesses to overcome the uncertainty and would welcome any opportunity to discuss your banking, lending and investment requirements. And my email is on that lovely plaque in the middle of your desk. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. And if it's not too late in the month to say it, a very happy new year and a new decade to you all. Now, my actual speech then says, I always welcome the invitation to speak at the first chamber lunch of the year, but having actually seen some of the questions that are coming through, I might just have to revise that. We'll see how we go later on. One minor correction as well, there are other entities I did work for, some of whom are at the back of the room, so I didn't just work for Ernst & Young. So Ross Scott and the Rossnells are down the corner there, and hi guys. It gives me an opportunity today, though, to focus on the crucial work that government will undertake across the coming months and to share my thoughts with you. And I promised when I was elected to Chief Minister that this government would find solutions to long-standing issues. So in 2018, we created the Common Strategic Policy to give focus to the ambitions of the Council of Ministers, and that was passed unanimously by the States Assembly. In 2019, in the first government plan, we provided the details about how we intended to implement the Common Strategic Policy, bringing together income, funding, policies, initiatives, and strategic outcomes for the first time. In English, we put the income-raising measures and how we were going to spend it, as well as capital, all together. In theory, that was to get people to focus on the whole package. In the past, for too many times, they looked at income and they looked at expenditure separately. We'd spend it, and then we'd work out, could we raise the money? That plan, though, that government plan was passed at the end of last year by a significant majority of the Assembly, 43 of the 49 members. And now in 2020, we can get that plan into action. So I'd like to take some time today to talk about how we're going to do that. Globally, as we've partially heard already, 2020 promises to be a year of continued international significance, with the US presidential election in November, increased OECD requirements under Pillar 2, and the Brexit transition period beginning this month and ending on the 31st of December. 2020 will likely see countries worldwide continue committing to meet stringent environmental standards with the aim of combating the ongoing climate emergency. This is actually one area where Jersey is already ahead, with the States Assembly voting in May 2019 to declare a climate emergency and aiming to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. When it comes to exploring global opportunities, some here might still feel some unease when I mention Brexit, and Chamber members will hopefully be aware of the extensive preparations made across government during 2019 to prepare for the potential impacts on Jersey of a disruptive no-deal exit. We work closely with local retailers, logistics providers, and Chamber to build the resilience necessary to ensure the continuity of our supply chains. Now, with the risk of a no-deal significantly reduced, we must look to the opportunities that Brexit provides to enhance our relationships with the UK, EU member states, and global international markets. And that includes building on the significant work already taking place alongside organisations like Jersey Finance in Hong Kong and their new offices in New York, which we opened in October. We've already ensured that the extension of the UK's WTO membership will be the default position in the event a comprehensive trade agreement is not reached. That policy has been an ambition of government for over 20 years, and that's been achieved. And I think we do need to commend the team and the politicians, in particular the Minister of External Relations, for their achievements on that front. And we've also renewed our vital customs relationship with the UK. So the Brexit unit in government will evolve with a renewed focus on international trade, and this week we'll publish the results of the Let's Talk Trade consultation launched in October of last year to understand industry needs and to shape our approach to external trade. So one of the key findings was overwhelming support for Jersey to take a principle-based approach to our ongoing engagement with the UK government. Those principles, including building on our Brexit and global markets objectives and promoting and protecting Jersey's international identity and reputation, have informed the creation of a negotiating mandate that will guide ministers and officials in the delicate discussions about Jersey's future. That mandate, which will shortly be shared with the UK government, will build on our extensive engagement across Whitehall and ensure Jersey's voice is heard during the UK's pursuit of a future economic partnership with the EU. While our future trade policy is fundamental to the long-term prosperity of the island, it does not exist in isolation. Instead, it's an integral aspect of the government plan, which provides the overarching blueprint for meeting the priorities set out in the Common Strategic Policy. Now, the work to implement that plan is already well underway to meet our commitments across all 5 priority areas. Under the aim of putting children first, we will see significant progress made this year on delivering the Children's Plan, and in particular in driving forward our significant operational improvement programme for children's services. That's about continuing to bring the legislative framework for children up to date and laying the foundations for long-term reforms to pre- and post-16 education. In addition, to date, 1,000 islanders have committed to supporting the Children's Pledge, and I would encourage you all here to do the same. Critical to meeting our commitment to improving health and well-being, we launched the Jersey Care Model in November. And this has had unprecedented public engagement, with more than 600 islanders attending the public meetings held before Christmas. The central tenet of the Care Model is that we recognise that as a health and social care provider, we can and must do more to safely offer more of our health services in the community, not just in the hospital, for the convenience of islanders. And we will achieve more by working closely with primary care providers such as GPs, community pharmacists and dentists, as well as experts who work for Jersey's thriving and vibrant community and voluntary sector. Now, in addition, we're making steady progress in improving mental health services, which is, again, an important focus of where we all are at the moment. And that's with the opening of the Listening Lounge at the end of last year. I'm hearing very good things about how that is operating at the moment. And to possibly start answering one of the questions that was thrown into the mix, in 2020, I am absolutely committed to concluding the debate on the new hospital location and construction. I think we are almost a year to the day when the planning permission was rejected. I'm happy to report that the Political Oversight Board is on schedule to meet our agreed timeline, and significant work is taking place in the background. The Deputy Chief Minister, Senator Farnham, will make a statement to the Assembly next week, alongside his regular report on the Board's progress. But last week, he and I were involved in productive talks with potential design and delivery partners as part of a comprehensive tendering exercise. And it is our intention to appoint a partner before summer. So this work will ensure that in the important matter of construction, we get the right partner for Jersey. I'm really confident that the project has the real momentum it needs, and that subject always to the State's Assembly, the hospital will be contractually committed by 2022. As part of our commitment to improve social inclusion, from this month we'll be introducing closer to home roadshow events in each parish, bringing free health checks, emotional wellbeing support and a range of other activities to local facilities across the island. Most critically to this audience, we will be making substantial progress on initiatives set out to nurture and grow our economy. 2020 will see the production and publication of the draft economic framework, which will benefit from an additional expenditure of £4.7 million. There's an additional £1.5 million to strengthen financial services and £5 million in 2020 to strengthen our international profile and promote our island identity, as well as money for other industries, including tourism. And by the end of the year, it is my belief we will have an effective migration policy agreed. Now, I'm glad to say that the Migration Policy Development Board now contains 2 members of Chamber, Murray, wherever he's gone to, and John Shenton. So I'm expecting, of course, no difficult questions in that area today. But seriously, I do thank all members, particularly lay members, for their time on this very important piece of work. The board published its interim report on the 24th of October last year and consulted with a number of stakeholders, including Chamber, throughout October and November. The final report and recommendations will be presented to me at the end of this month, with the aim that a policy debate on the proposed migration controls will take place this summer. Now, I don't deny that, in my view, this will be the most difficult policy decision faced by an island government in recent years, and is almost certainly going to be controversial, whichever way it turns out. But for the sake of our economy and long-term sustainability, it's critical that we get it right. That word, sustainability, is central to how this government will formulate policy and measure its success in future. Last year, the State's Assembly passed the renewed Public Finances Law, which sets the direction and rules on how public funds are spent. It contains a clause that requires every council ministers to take into account the sustainable well-being of current and future generations when developing the annual government plan. That's quite a significant development and places sustainable well-being as central to our government purpose. So this week, the Minister for Infrastructure set out how we will pursue the new sustainable transport policy. That policy sets the objective that by 2020, the way we travel in the island will be cleaner, more efficient, and make our island greener. And in the last month, we published the carbon neutral strategy with the aim of achieving the Assembly's goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. And that strategy is still a high-level document. It sets out principles and issues. There is a lot of work to come during the course of this year, but £5 million is already in place for some initiatives to begin this year as a result of some of the decisions we took as ministers in 2019. And 2020 will also see us improve how we report on the performance of government through the annual report and accounts and the well-being of the island as a whole. So on Friday, I'm going to be launching what we're calling the Jersey Performance Framework. That framework will act as the barometer for Jersey's sustainable wellbeing aims and will provide an accessible tool for islanders to see how well Jersey is doing as a society across a wide range of social, economic and environmental benchmarks. And we want that framework to provide the clarity and transparency that has long been called for by islanders, the media and states members alike. And I do again want to take the opportunity to thank the team who are delivering that framework. It is a first, and it is actually being watched with great interest by global organisations. When you compare January 2019 to January 2020, I believe government is in a far more confident position. In January 2019, we had disputes across almost all pay groups within the public sector, a number of which had begun before the elections. In the last 12 months, we've reached settlement or resolved with all pay groups for 2018, 2019, and 2020. So we are now on the front foot to begin negotiations on the 2021 pay awards. That means we are now ahead of the game rather than being 2 years behind. Just before Christmas, we announced our office modernisation strategy. And indeed, that's going through at the moment. That sets out an ambitious plan to vacate 14 offices and move 1,600 public servants into a new permanent building, providing them with the modern facilities they need and deserve. We've already sought expressions of interest and intend to identify a preferred developer within the coming months, followed by an announcement later in the year on our pathway to construction. As well as meeting our responsibilities to our staff, it will create sites for affordable housing. It will potentially save up to £7 million a year in running costs, as well as additionally potentially 30 million in capital costs, but that's over the next 30 years. In 2018, I was told when I first started that we faced huge exposure to certain legal cases of hundreds of millions of pounds. In 2019, we introduced the damages law, reducing our risk to exposure to such lawsuits while continuing to safeguard the needs of people who have suffered injury. That was probably the first decision on day one that I was asked to make. It was a no-brainer. It was even quicker than changing my tie to answer somebody else's question. In the first 6 months of operation, we have seen one claim reduced from approximately £19 million to £8 million, and another from £49 million to £15 million. That's about £45 million in total so far. I would say on day one as a decision, that was a good decision to make and was a priority. Our efficiencies programme is committed to achieving £100 million in efficiencies over the next 4 years, with the aim to redirect the money saved into paying for government plan initiatives. We already identified 40 million savings in 2020 and have begun to take action to implement the necessary changes, making sustainable improvements by joining up services, being more commercial and cutting waste. So using health as an example, that department, which historically was held out as not being able to make savings, has already delivered over £2 million of efficiencies in 2019 in advance of the government plan, through rationalising and reducing suppliers, reducing the need for hospital admissions, and deploying e-rostering services. The target alone for health in 2020 is £9 million. On financial matters, the government plan outlined a number of pieces of work for this year, to focus on just two. Firstly, we are examining the refinancing of our pension debt, with options being explored that would potentially achieve significant, and I do not use that word lightly, long-term cost savings by repaying the debts by other methods. And secondly, we've made a commitment to introduce a zero-based budgeting across the organisation, something that was not done properly or thoroughly before. That work commenced 4 weeks ago. So we are shifting from plans to action, to achieving our longer-term goal of improving services, improving being the emphasis there, and then providing them effectively and efficiently to the islanders of Jersey. I want 2020 to be a year when we not only tackle head-on the policy and modernisation challenges that have dogged successive governments, but where we take the time to reflect on how we identify as an island and as a community. And the Minister for International Development has been leading the Island Identity Policy Development Board, and following an extensive period of research and community engagement, will submit her first report later this year. But I hope that work will help create a unifying message that will reignite pride and passion in our island. It is their ambition to help government and our partners tell the island's story and to galvanise islanders to get behind that identity and to share it globally. I'm also pleased to announce that this summer we will also hold the first Showcase Jersey event in London, supplementing the successful parliamentary and ministerial engagement that already takes place throughout the year. Work is ongoing to bring arm's-length organisations, businesses and partners, including Chamber, together to demonstrate the diversity and excellence of our economy, not only in financial and professional services, but in all areas in which we excel: heritage, the arts, food, technology, conservation and agriculture. And I want to conclude by reflecting on one of the most important aspects of our cultural identity. The 75th anniversary of liberation this year provides us with an important opportunity for reflection, and is perhaps the last significant opportunity to celebrate with the islanders who spent a part of their lives under German rule. I hope that many of you and the organisations you represent will be supporting Jersey Week and the wider Liberation 75 celebrations that have been organised by the Bailiffs' Chambers. I also hope you will lend your image and your voice to the wonderful project by Art House Jersey to create the People's Picture, a substantial community art piece that will be revealed in April. The government, of course, will be supporting Liberation 75 and will shortly announce plans to help all island school children and those who live through occupation to commemorate the anniversary. And as Chief Minister, I will also be launching a series of challenges for young islanders as part of the wider programme of education and celebration to engage the next generation in the importance of this anniversary. So the coming year will be crucial to the future prosperity of Jersey. It is one where domestically we will tackle the issues that have hampered successive governments and provide the decisions and action that will generate results, instill confidence and benefit all islanders. It is also a year when our national identity will be ever more important as we play our role in meeting global responsibilities to the environment and achieving a more sustainable society. And it will be a year when our well-established relationships with colleagues in the UK, the Crown dependencies and partners worldwide will be of considerable importance as we look to work closely to reach agreement on a wide range of areas. Now, I hope from hearing about the programme of work that I've briefly outlined this lunchtime, there's even more that still goes on, that you share my confidence that we can meet the emerging challenges of the new decade and that Jersey will prosper in the coming years. Yes, we have taken the time necessary to get the right plans in place, but now they are in place, and I expect to see action and real successes coming in 2020. I've made very clear to the Chief Executive and his senior leadership team that 2020 is a year of delivery. I and my colleagues and the Council Ministers will be looking to see significant progress on the initiatives contained within the government plan and a realisation of the vision within the Common Strategic Policy. 2020 is a year of action. I look forward to returning later this year to share the results with you, and thank you very much.
Questions on the floor, if you've got them, please let us know. In the meantime, I'll go to Slido. The top question that 29 people wanted me to ask, no surprises about the hospital. It could be phrased in many different ways, but there are probably 300 people in the audience. Optimistic of you. There's just under 240. How many people does the Chief Minister think will still be alive when the new hospital is finally finished? And that came from your Health Minister. No, it didn't.
On the guess of the average age in the audience being younger than me, all of us. The serious point on this, and again, it's interesting when you look back, it is roughly a year, and I say almost to the day, that the Planning Permission on the last application, which was started before the elections, was rejected. It's therefore less than a year that the Assembly rescinded the decision. So in that period of time, so we're now, let's say, 11 months down the line, and we are now, the team has changed. And we are now in a much more significant, and I think a better place. There's been much more engagement with both clinicians. There's been engagement during this last summer with something like 40, I think it was, external organisations, voluntary organisations and things like that. And we've now got the citizen panel that is in play. So our time frame, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes, which is about getting that structure right. And I said it previously, if you keep doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting a different outcome, how many times you heard it, I think that is the definition of madness. There were 2 attempts at this, and those 2 attempts cost around £40 million. So we are 11 months down the line. The time frame on this now, the fact that I have been speaking to, I'll use the word contractors, in the last week. So that means that tendering process, we're doing a number of things in parallel. We expect an announcement on the successful party on that to be by the summer. We expect Senator Fondré will be making another announcement, which I won't allude to because it's always, the protocol is we form states members first. That will be on Tuesday. So there is a line of direction. There is a timeline that we are working to. The original timeline that we put out, which we did a report in May last year, this was our plan. We are pretty well still on track for that. And what one's got to remember is that the completion of the hospital, the original plans, the completion of it, not the commencement of it, and all the different phases, was around 2029, 2030. Please note, I'm speaking from memory, so take the principle. Roughly speaking, if we do a different site, it all depends how that comes through, we are still anticipating making that same timeline. So we're just sorting out the planning and the structures, the teams that are different. The Jersey care model is crucial. That is based, Murray, you remember the jargon from P82 in 2010. It had never been implemented.
Yeah.
So that's the progress that we are making.
In fairness, and some will say this, and I said it at the last lunch, you as corporate services panel were the main objectors to delivering the hospital the last 2 times that cost 40-odd million pounds in the cycle of having to look at all the sites again.
No. The site got rejected twice on the recommendation of a planning inspector.
But you weren't in favour, were you?
No, but at the end of the day, the planning inspector and
you
the planning
objected
minister...
as corporate services. Okay. So we're still looking at the same timeline. It's still going to be, what, 2029 as it was originally?
It's still, at the moment, on the same timeline that was previously in play.
Same costs?
What I will just say is one thing we're finding, for example, is that the original plans were scoped in about 2012. So even if the thing had been implemented and approved last year, we'd have been dealing with a building that was basically 7 years out of date. Where we are now is we are seeing much more inclusion for things like mental health, with the different health care model that's being looked at, which is about delivering different services outside of the main hospital. That has a whole impact on what we deliver. So actually, the fact that we are going through a new process, it is curtailed actually. There is a pace of change in there. There is a new team in there who I think are very, very good. I think actually we will end up with a better product as a result. We're trying not to dwell on the past about who said what and when and whoever. We are trying to achieve delivery, and the steer is within this political cycle, so we take away that political risk. That's where we are at the moment, subject always to the States Assembly. And don't forget, corporate was only 1 or 4 or 5 voices, depending where one were. It's a majority of the Parliament, of which obviously you were were one as well, Murray.
Yeah, quite. Talking of which, former Deputy, Andrew Lewis, question. Shortages of staff is a serious problem for many businesses. You'll hear that from a lot of people in this room, finding recruitment the most difficult thing to overcome. When and how will we see the government address this before it's too late and some businesses have to relocate?
So this ties through to migration as a whole, and as I said in my speech, I think that's going to be probably the most difficult subject we're going to have to deal with this year. And I've said it previously, if these things were simple, we'd have done it, and other people would have done it in the past. And they've not been. And what's actually, even this week, it was drawn to our attention, actually reinforcing what we've said elsewhere, how poor our data is in this area in certain bits. And that's part of the issue we've got. So we've got the issues, and we know the range of problems we've got. One is going to be, let everybody in, no controls, that's the extreme end of one. The other end of that argument is shut the doors and don't let anybody in. Both of those are probably not something anybody particularly wants to think about. So we're going to be somewhere in the middle. But what we've got to do is that controls right, and that is why, and you've been very heavily involved in that process, as has John Shenton, and as I said, thank you both for your time, as with another member of the public as well. And so I will see your suggestions and your advice in, I believe, 2 weeks.
Well, you might see the committees. We might not agree with them yet. We're reserving judgment right now.
But the point, to take that away, One thing I think we've all learned is that this is a hideously complicated subject. And what we have got to then do is actually educate both states members and the public as part of that process before we launch straight into, these are the proposals, they're lodged, and you've got 6 weeks to consider them. But we are still aiming for debate in the summer, and you will see the proposals, not as soon as I've seen them, but there is a time frame. Once I've seen them, they will go to council ministers, and we will then start informing and making those decisions over the next few weeks. There has got to be a pace of change on that. The objective is to get this sorted this year.
But the question really asked, we can't recruit people at the moment because there aren't enough people in the island to recruit. We're full in terms of capacity to find talent, so we have to bring talent in. I speak collectively for business. Do you see that changing in any way? Because if it is going to change, there's a lot of business say, well, if we can't recruit someone here, we'll recruit them somewhere else.
What I said, I think probably on this platform, certainly last year, was that in a Brexit year there would be no change in policy. I think that's going to be almost the same this year, because anything that gets implemented will be towards the end of the year, I'm sure, because we know we have to give certainty to business. We also know the various demands that we are having. We're also so there's going to be a variety of factors we have to take account of. However, it's the point about it's the economy stupid. We know we've got to make sure that business is still as happy as it can be, insofar as you are ever happy with government. But so let's, without getting drawn into where do I think the numbers will be and all that type of stuff, it's a hugely difficult problem. There's been a big piece of work going on to actually get to the nub of that problem. We're now going through that next stage of bringing that together, and then it will then start going through the government process and the consultation process. We will see more of that in the next couple of months, and it's going to be a hard conversation whichever way we go, because there will be lots, probably the majority of people in this room, I would suspect, may have one view. I suspect there will be certain elements of the public who may have competingly different views. And as a government, it's going to have to be how we manage that. But it's the economy, stupid, and ultimately, you will pay our wages.
Yes, we do.
I can just follow on from that. How do you intend to ensure these affordable housing units actually stay affordable rather than being subject to price gouging or just ever slowly creeping up, or hidden fees or something predatory like that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
How do you intend to ensure affordable housing stays affordable?
I have to say, I think you're asking to an extent, to the level of detail in that, you're asking the wrong question, asking the wrong person. From my perspective, I would be interested in seeing some schemes. We have had some discussions around, for example, some schemes that come through on the parishes, where they retain an element of equity, or whether, but sometimes there's some legal difficulties around essentially when a property is sold, you put something in the contract which says it can only ever be sold back to an overarching owner, and that the increase is done by a percentage and whatever the increase is in the overall market. The increase in the measures for a 3-bedroom unit or something. I'm not saying that is a decision, by the way, but I'm just saying there have been some exploration remarks. I suspect that will be one of the areas that Senator Messick's board will be coming out with later in the year. But the reason I caveat my remark as well is I understand occasionally there have been some legal difficulties in that area as to how that works. So there are some discussions around. I'm waiting to see the output with as much interest as everybody else, actually. But it falls into two categories, as I keep going back to. It's about the supply side, which is what we are focusing on at the moment. That takes slightly longer. The demand side, which would be around the population, and then actually the individual transactions.
Okay, going to leave that one there, but thank you for the question. Appreciate it. If there's any more questions, do let us know. Are there any? I'm going to have to shorten these answers ever so slightly, Chief Minister. Are there any plans to create a universal island-wide recycling programme which is cost-effective, efficient, and easily accessible for all islanders?
Universal. Universal in terms of states provided, not I'm aware of. Universal in trying to get the parishes that don't do the the curbside recycling, and to get more of them involved. I believe there is still, and I believe there have been another couple of parishes that have come on board.
So, joining up time.
Yep.
What is the government doing to protect our supply chain in light of Brexit, Condor service levels, the recent threat from Flybe, and our reliance on the UK's mail plane?
Well, for brevity, I'll deal with Brexit, I think.
Yeah.
And again, detail, going and looking down that way, I think Ian is down there as Minister for External Relations. The External Relations team have, in my view, been doing an excellent job all the way through on a load of stuff with Brexit, particularly around supply of goods into the island, mainly focused on the northbound route, i.e. the UK. That fell into at least two areas. One which may sound a bit silly, but actually it was making sure that the customs arrangements that we had with the UK were actually all I's dotted and T's crossed, which is why we had a new customs union arrangement that was approved last year. The actual physical supply, there have been a lot of discussions and visits and work with Portsmouth and others, and UK in general. And I think, and discussions with some of the key suppliers over here about where warehousing should be and what should be provided. At various points in the course of last year, we have been prepared or been ready to have a further discussion or action around future supply or increased supply of warehousing in the right location. With the present position, I think we're of the view that the whole risk on that front is now diminishing down. So I think on that side, I think we are in a good position as of today. But I do make the point, a lot of work was taking place last year and previously, and that whole team have done a very good job.
Chamber is getting a briefing from government, I should add to that, within the next week, which we've been asking for since the beginning of the year. So that's on the way as well. And the External Relations Minister will be our speaker at the May lunch for doing. Chief Minister, oh dear. You say you're a supporter of sustainable transport on the island. With that in mind, what bus number do you catch?
Any one of the number ones that go to the west. Not that often, I have to say, but I do occasionally catch them. You
do occasionally catch a bus?
Yeah.
Excellent. Fine. We'll do spot the Chief Minister on it then. Okay, fine. We'll do a new...
I even occasionally cycle, Murray.
Oh, we're getting an I Spy book out. Where have you seen the Chief Minister lately? Having lived in London my whole life, I have been shocked by the fact that food is more expensive here. Why is this the case when VAT is 20% and GST is only 5%? I don't think there's any VAT on food anyway. So, actually, can I just ask the question on this, on food? I mean, there'll be suppliers who will say that it's about delivery, but there are an awful lot of bits of food, and some people in this room will be looking forward to their cardboard box that they're going to unwrap later on of food that they've ordered from the UK that arrives in. That comes in without any tax on it whatsoever, and yet everything else that's delivered to the island that goes into the supermarket has got tax on it. When are you going to do something about that?
Well, I would argue we've already done something about it.
Something?
But not as much as we would all like. So I'm very much in your territory, Murray, I think, in terms of the de minimis issue. It is, in my view, an unfair barrier for local businesses, because essentially it's already a cost that you will incur, and somebody importing into here, or an individual buying from Tesco, for the sake of argument, online or whatever, from the UK isn't. And so what we have done, and that's been agreed, and comes in, I think it's 1st of July this year, or 1st of June, can't remember. We've reduced the de minimis down to £135 rather than the £240. That has been approved, was approved in the government plan a few weeks ago.
But it's not really far enough, is it?
It's not enough, in my view, but it is that first step. And bearing in mind that when the Treasury Minister first tried it, I think at the end of 2018, but my brain is trying to think back that far, it didn't get the support that it, in my view, needed. So we have achieved, I would say, something. It is around sending that message that we are trying to support you where we can, but I agree we do need to do more. The argument, of course, is that in some time in the next few years, that de minimis as a whole across Europe will go. So we're just trying to bring that in slowly and just manage then the impact that does happen.
I'm going to leave that there because we could argue about that for ages. What incentives are there for uni students to return to Jersey? The cost of living makes it impossible for them to get on the housing list because of the cost of living. So bringing talent, uni students, back to the island. You'll remember the time that I had a political career that I suggested that we do a tax-free period for students coming back so that they could get themselves on a housing ladder, which didn't garner the support that it might have done. What are your thoughts on enticing students back? Do we need to do something? Do we need to get some incentives in there?
The thing about incentives, and we get very cautious about when you start targeting individuals, it's about how that works and all that type of thing. If you look at it globally, the issues we've made about housing applies to everybody. It also applies, we are, having said that, moving away from students, key worker accommodation. We're aware of that issue, and there is some measures have already been taken to try and start addressing some of that. For university students, is always that other dilemma. At what point do you want a university student to come back? Do you want them to come back straight after they left university, or do you want to get some experience off the island and get that wide and then come back? And that's a discussion we're going to be having. Around the whole skills stuff, which is about growing your own internally, we are doing some stuff, even around nurses and things, and where homegrown nurses are doing, I think, as a degree in nursing, and I think we've achieved somewhere around 45, 50.
There's more degree courses now than there ever were before.
Exactly.
Taking that a stage further, are you a fan of having a university in Jersey? Should we have a university in Jersey?
I'm at this stage neutral on it. I'm the type of person I'd like to know what the numbers look like. I am in that territory. I do understand some of the benefits. I'm also in the territory that certainly, I'll say 20 years ago, employers were also looking for experience from off-island in terms of local people who'd gone away, got the wider experience and then come back, and that makes them pretty invaluable. So from my point of view, as a student who did go away, I think that is a huge benefit. However, the world has changed in that territory. I want to know what it's going to cost us.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the bottom question. Is there any chance of us having a simple yes or no to any of the questions raised?
If you give me a yes or no answer, yes.
Are you for a university, yes or no?
Trouble is, I can't give you a yes or no answer. Apologies, because I don't know how much it's going to cost.
Yeah. Have we got another question from the floor? Because we're hogging it on Slido at the moment, and someone may have thought of one. Yes, no, I know you want to all get back to work because you're really keen to do so. It's the most popular question that's on the screen at the moment, so I've got to ask it. Now, forgive me for asking, but how can Charlie Parker justify salaries paid to his staff?
Okay, assuming this is a comment around some of the interims noise that was around quite a lot of 2019, what I would say, have been finding and making very clear during the whole organisation is that there have been a lot of gaps and a lot of issues that have not been addressed through significant underinvestment for a very long time. Also, we've had some departures as well, which we've had to fill at fairly short notice. So as a whole, that's meant we've had to get people in to change the organisation. Now, and the message always was that those number of interims and consultants, etc., would go down. And I think, again, this was from memory, I think when either when I started or very soon after I'd started, we were at about 30, and I believe that number has significantly come down since then. But if you're going to bring in the skill sets that you need to do the changes, and I look at like the hospital team, who I think have made a significant improvement in where we are, I'm looking at some of the HR people who are really getting to grips with some of the really poor places we've been. We've had one very recently where we didn't know we'd employed somebody 3 years ago or 2 years ago, before my time, at a certain salary, which I think was reported in Bailiwick. And that's about poor data, about poor record keeping, you name it. I believe, actually, when the chief executive first started the organisation, which was before my time, he was told in November, bear in mind the deadline was May, that the organisation had not even really properly considered GDPR. Bearing in mind everybody in this room, I suspect, have been planning it for 2 years. So to give an indication, that's why I can't give you a yes/no answer, to give an indication of the problems we are facing and therefore why we've had to throw a lot of resource in it. That is starting to stabilise. We're getting a lot more permanent people in the right places, and I think as a whole, for me, the organisation is actually starting to look a lot better.
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase this last question, because it'll have to be the last one, because we're 24 minutes past, and we always say that we'll try and close by 2:30 at least. The question is, when are we going to have a real conversation regarding population and infrastructure? Can I just paraphrase that slightly and say, what's an acceptable number for our population? Is it 120,000?
As I said previously, I'm not going to give you a number. No, because people keep trying to. So, as I said, I think the difficulty we know on any number to date is if we say, oh, actually, because I don't know what it was when you first started in politics. I'll say when I first started, which was earlier than you, would have been, I think it was around 84,000. At one point, I might be wrong there, at one point it was 93, it was never going to go above 95, and now at 106,000. If we'd set that limit at, say, 90,000, what happens when that 90,000th and first person comes in? That's the problem with setting a number. That's why we're focused on, let's get the controls in place. Let's understand what on earth is going on in terms of how people come in, at what level, and what it costs us. And there's a whole range of other areas as well, because there's the social value that people bring to that. We need to understand that, and then we need to educate people, and then, once the controls have been beefed up, we can then have that sensible discussion around where does that go in the future.
There's about another 4 pages of questions there. Would you mind if I sent them to you?
You can send them through, but yes.
You won't get an answer. Right, fine.
Well, we'll give the answers where we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please...
I do remember the comment about how often I change my tie, so there we go.
Yeah, we didn't get down to the tie question and your indecision on it. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please thank the Chief Minister?